I wasn't supposed to record this tonight. I had a different script ready, a standard haunting about a lighthouse in Maine, but then I saw it. You know that feeling when you're scrolling through r/nosleep at 3 in the morning and a headline just bites you. This one didn't just bite. It sank its teeth in and pulled. It was titled "My Childhood Home Had a Seventh Window," and at first I thought it was just another creative exercise in architectural horror. But then I started reading the details. The author described a Victorian-style farmhouse on the edge of a dead end. Road in a town so small it isn't even on most maps. My town. Then they mentioned the seventh window, a narrow, decorative pane of stained glass hidden behind a heavy mahogany wardrobe in the upstairs guest room. My heart didn't just skip, it stopped. I grew up in that house. I spent 10 years of my life sleeping 3 feet away from that mahogany wardrobe. I know for a fact that the stained glass depicts a wilted lily, a detail so obscure and specific that no one, literally no one, outside of my immediate family could possibly know it exists. The wardrobe hasn't been moved since 1994. I feel sick. I feel like someone has been standing in my childhood bedroom, peeling back the layers of my own memory just to see what's underneath. I checked the user's profile, and it was a throwaway account created only 20 minutes before the post went live. Now, as I sit here in the silence of my studio, the air feels different. Heavier, like the house itself is leaning in to listen to what I'm about to tell you. I shouldn't be reading this to you. If I finish the post, acknowledging it's real. But if I don't, I'll never know how it ends for me. I'm going to read it now. But please, if this starts sounding too familiar to you, turn it off. Close the tab. Some secrets are meant to stay buried behind the furniture. The story officially begins with a user who went by the handle Archon92. Now, Archon wasn't your typical creepypasta enthusiast. He wasn't looking for ghosts or urban legends to spice up a lonely Tuesday night. He was a digital archivist, a data scraper by trade, someone who spent his professional life wading through the discarded junk of the internet to find lost media and forgotten forums. To him, the web was a vast, sprawling attic, and he was the one tasked with sorting the antiques from the trash. It was mundane work, really. He'd sit in his ergonomic chair, the blue light of 3 different monitors reflecting off his glasses, sipping lukewarm coffee while his scripts ran in the background. It was a life of quiet routine, defined by the rhythmic clicking of a mechanical keyboard and the hum of a cooling fan. There is a certain comfort in data. It's logical, it's cold, and it follows rules. Or at least that's what he thought until he stumbled upon the dead drop. It happened during a deep crawl of an old, supposedly deactivated server farm in North Virginia. Among the broken image links and 404 errors, Archon found a redirect to a subreddit. That didn't appear in any search index. It was simply called r/specifics. At first glance, it looked like a standard troubleshooting forum. The layout was the default Reddit skin, sterile and white, stripped of any personality or community flares. But as he began to click through the threads, the normalcy started to peel away like wet wallpaper. Most subreddits are built on shared interests, movies, gaming, local news, but r/specifics was built on something else entirely. It was a collection of hyper-detailed logs. There were no scary titles, no clickbait, just dates and strings of coordinates. One post caught his eye because it was timestamped only 3 minutes prior. The title was a string of hexadecimal code that translated simply to observation log, subject 4412. Larchon. Clicked it, expecting a niche role-playing game, or perhaps some experimental ARG. What he found instead was a wall of text that felt like a bucket of ice water poured down his spine. Though the post didn't describe a monster or a killer, it described a man sitting in a room. It described the exact brand of the man's ergonomic chair. It noted the level of liquid remaining in his mug. It mentioned a small, barely visible coffee stain on the S key of his mechanical keyboard. Archon looked down. There on the S key was a faint, brownish smudge he'd forgotten to clean up a week ago. He felt a sudden, sharp prickle of heat behind his ears. This is, though, contrast that breaks a person, the distance between the safety of a digital screen and the physical reality of your own skin. One moment you are an observer, a ghost in the machine, and the next you realize the machine has been observing you back. The mundane act of clicking A. Link had transformed his sanctuary into a glass box. He told himself it was a coincidence. He told himself that coffee stains on keyboards are common for data scrapers. But then he scrolled to the bottom of the post, where a single line of text had been edited in just seconds ago. Subject 4412 is now checking the S key. He is beginning to feel afraid. This is where the fun begins. Archon sat frozen. The hum of his computer fan, which usually served as a comforting white noise, now sounded like a low, mechanical growl. He pulled his hand away from the keyboard, as if the plastic keys had turned red-hot. His eyes were glued to the screen, scanning the observation log for any sign that this was a hoax, a clever bit of coding, a script that scraped his webcam or accessed his personal files. He was a professional, after all. I knew how easy it was to violate someone's privacy if you had the right backdoor access. But this felt different. This wasn't just data, it was sensory. The post continued to update in real time. A new paragraph appeared. Subject 4412 has stopped typing. His heart rate is approximately 104 beats per minute. He is wearing a faded gray t-shirt with a small bleach stain near the hem, a shirt he should have thrown away 3 years ago. Archon looked down. The bleach stain was there, a tiny white bloom against the fabric exactly where the text described it. A cold sweat broke across his forehead. Then, the most jarring detail of all appeared. He is currently touching the small, raised mole on the right side of his neck, just below the jawline. He does this when he is nervous. He doesn't even realize he's doing it. Archon's fingers were, indeed, hovering over the exact spot on his neck. He yanked his hand down and slammed it onto the desk. "Okay," he whispered to the empty room, his voice cracking. "Okay, very funny." Hollow. He forced a dry, cynical laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. He tried to summon his inner skeptic, the part of him that spent years debunking cursed files and fake creepypastas. This had to be a prank. It was the only logical explanation. It was probably Dave. Dave was a high-level security consultant with a warped sense of humor and enough technical wizardry to pull off a stunt like this. Dave knew about the gray shirt. Dave had seen that mole 1,000 times at the gym. "Nice try, Dave," Archon muttered, leaning back into his chair and trying to reclaim his posture. "A bit over the top, don't you think? Scraped my webcam and ran a text-to-log script. You're losing your touch." He felt a momentary surge of relief. Dark humor was his armor, if he could turn the horror into a joke. It couldn't hurt him. He imagined Dave sitting in his own darkened apartment, laughing at the monitor while he fed these specifics into the R specifics thread. It made sense. It was the only thing that made sense. He even considered replying to the thread with something snarky, something like, "Tell the observer his mother says hi." But as he reached for the mouse to type the retort, his eyes caught the latest update at the bottom of the screen. The subject is attempting to rationalize the situation. He thinks a friend named Dave is responsible. He is currently smiling to himself, a pathetic, trembling little smirk, intended to mask his mounting terror. He believes that naming the fear makes it go away. He is incorrect. Dave has been dead for 45 minutes. The smirk vanished instantly. Archon felt a wave of nausea roll through his stomach. Dave lived 3 towns away. They hadn't spoken in 2 days. The log wasn't just observing Archon. Anymore, it was expanding its reach. It was providing information he couldn't possibly verify yet. But the sheer confidence of the text felt like a physical weight. The contrast was now unbearable. The safety of his apartment, with its familiar smells of old paper and ozone, was being systematically dismantled by a wall of text on a screen. He grabbed his phone, his thumbs trembling so hard he nearly dropped it. He needed to call Dave. He needed to hear Dave's annoying, nasally voice tell him to shut up and stop being a paranoid idiots. He needed the world to go back to being mundane and boring. But as he hovered over Dave's contact name, a new line appeared on the monitor, glowing white against the dark mode of the subreddit. He is reaching for his phone. He wants to call a dead man. If he presses call, he will hear the sound of something wet sliding across a floor. Is that what you want? Subject 4412. Do you want to hear the silence on the other end? Archon dropped the phone. It clattered onto the hardwood floor, the screen cracking in a spiderweb pattern. He didn't pick it up. He couldn't. He was staring at the screen, at the words that seemed to be writing themselves before his eyes, faster than any human could type. Though specifics weren't just about his life anymore. They were becoming his reality. He realized with a jolt of pure, unadulterated dread that he wasn't just reading a story. He was the ink. He was the paper. And whatever was writing, the log was just getting started with the introduction. Though, real horror wasn't that they knew who he was. It was that they were deciding what happened to him next. Archon stared at his cracked phone on the floor, the screen bleeding light into the shadows. Beneath his desk, his breath came in shallow, jagged hitches. He needed to move, but his muscles felt like they had been replaced with lead. The logic of the archivist took over, a desperate, reflexive habit. When the data doesn't make sense, you don't stop, you look for the documentation. You look for the metadata. He scrolled up, bypassing the terrifyingly accurate log of his own movements, searching for the About section or a pinned post on R specifics. He found it. It was a thread titled, "The Cycle and the Observer, Protocols for Consumption," pinned to the top with 0 comments and 1,000 upvotes from accounts with names that were nothing but long strings of binary. It wasn't a FAQ, it was a list of rules. The prose was clinical, devoid of the theatricality of typical internet horror. It read like a safety manual for a nuclear reactor. Rule 1: observations are retrospective until they are not. If you find your current actions logged, the delay has been synchronized. Do not attempt to desynchronize by behaving erratically. The observer accounts for chaotic variables. Rule 2: the specifics are the anchor. The more details you acknowledge as true, the more the observer can physically manifest within your local proximity. Rule 3: reading the log creates a feedback loop. Your awareness of the observation is, in itself, an observed event. This is, though, cycle. Rule 4. If the observer mentions a third party, Dave, do not attempt to verify their status. Verification is an invitation for the observer to bridge the distance between subjects. Archon felt a hollow thud in his chest. He had already broken Rule 4. He had thought of Dave. He had reached for the phone. The specifics weren't just a record, they were a lure. This sub wasn't a place where people shared stories. It was a hunting ground where the act of reading was the act of being caught. It was a supernatural rule set disguised as a digital glitch. He couldn't stand the silence of the room anymore. He needed a human voice, something that wasn't a string of text on a glowing screen. Despite the warning in Rule 4, he picked up his cracked phone. The glass bit into his thumb, drawing a tiny bead of blood. He didn't call Dave. Instead, he dialed Sarah. Sarah was his sister, a pragmatist who worked in a library and didn't believe in anything she couldn't touch. The phone rang. Once, twice. Each ring felt like a needle, stitching his nerves together. On the third ring, she picked up. "Hey, Arch," she said. Her voice was warm, familiar, and grounded. It sounded like Sunday. Dinners and childhood arguments. "Everything okay? You're calling late." Sarah Archon exhaled, the name feeling like a life raft. I'm having a weird night. I think I've been working too hard. I'm seeing some things online, some really specific stuff about me. And I just needed to hear a real person. You're at home, right? Everything is normal. Normal as it gets, Sarah replied. Just finishing some paperwork. Why? You sound like you've seen a ghost. Or tracked down another, lost, 80s commercial that turned out to be a fever dream. She laughed, and for a second, the horror of the R-specifics thread felt distant, a silly nightmare. That would dissolve in the morning. The contrast was a physical relief, the warmth of her sibling. Banter was the perfect antidote to the cold, sterile logs. Archon started to smile. He looked back at his monitor, ready to close the tab and walk away from the computer entirely. Yeah, I know. I'm being an idiot, Archon said, his voice steadier. It's just this thread. It mentioned the mole on my neck. It even knew about that old gray shirt with the bleach stain. Well, I think I'm just being targeted by some high-level doxer. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A silence that lasted just a heartbeat too long. The gray shirt? Sarah asked. Her tone hadn't changed, but the cadence was off. The one with the bleach stain near the hem. The one you should have thrown away 3 years ago. Archon's smile froze. Yeah. How did you know that? I haven't seen you in months. I can see it quite clearly from here, Archon, she said. The warmth was gone. Her voice was still Sarah's, but it was flat, like a recording played at the wrong speed. The bleach stain looks like a wilted lily. Did you know that? It matches the window. The 7th window. Archon's blood turned to slush. Sarah, that's not funny. Who is this? I'm just following the rules, Archon, the voice said, and now there was a wet, sliding sound in the background of the call, a rhythmic schlick thump, like something heavy and moist being dragged across a hardwood floor. Rule 5, when the subject seeks external validation, provide it using the specifics they hold most dear. It makes the transition smoother. Sarah, stop. Archon screamed into the phone. I'm not Sarah anymore, the voice whispered, and the sound of the sliding grew louder, as if it were right behind her. I'm just a specific detail. And right now, the most specific detail about you is that you're holding a phone with a cracked screen and your thumb is bleeding. I can taste the copper from here. Archon slammed the phone down on the desk, but the call didn't disconnect. The speaker was still active. From the tiny, tinny grill, he could hear the sound of his own heavy breathing echoed back to him with a 3-second delay. He looked at the monitor. The log had updated. Subject 4412 has initiated contact with subject 4412A. The bridge is complete. The observer is no longer digital. The observer is now in the hallway. The hallway. Archon lived alone. He looked toward his bedroom door, the only thing separating him from the dark corridor. In the silence of the apartment, he heard it. Schlick thump. Schlick thump. The sound wasn't coming from the phone anymore. It was coming from the other side of the wood. The transition was over. The mundane world had been deleted. The sound outside the door wasn't just a noise, it was a physical pressure, a weight pressing against the wood that seemed to make the very air in the room vibrate. Archon didn't move. I couldn't. He sat in his chair, his eyes fixed on the bedroom door, waiting for the handle to turn. But the handle remained still. The schlick thump had stopped right outside, leaving a silence so profound it felt like he had been plunged underwater. His ears were ringing with the sound of his own pulse, a frantic, uneven rhythm that matched the flickering of his monitors. Then the screen flickered, a sharp, violent strobe of white light, and the R-specifics thread refreshed. He didn't want to look. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to keep his eyes on the door, to watch the barrier. But the pull of the data was too strong. It was the mirror event, though he didn't know the term yet. He glanced at the monitor. The text was no longer appearing in blocks. It was streaming in a single, continuous line, flowing across the screen like a ticker tape of his own damnation. Subject 4412 is paralyzed, the screen read. He is staring at the door. He believes the door is the boundary. He is mistaken. The boundary was never the door. The boundary was the glass. He is about to turn around. He is about to look at the window behind him. He doesn't want to, but the logic of the cycle demands it. In 3, 2, 1. Archon felt a cold, invisible hand wrap around his chin. It wasn't a physical hand, but a compulsion, a sudden tectonic shift in his own will. His neck craned. His chair creaked. Against every fiber of his being, he turned his head away from the door and toward the darkened window that overlooked the alleyway. The glass was a perfect mirror. Because the room was lit by the monitors and the alleyway was pitch black, he saw himself reflected with startling clarity. He saw his own wide, bloodshot eyes. He saw the sweat glistening on his forehead. But he also saw what was standing directly behind his reflection. It wasn't Sarah. It wasn't Dave. It was a shape that seemed to be made of television static and wet ink, a silhouette that defied the light of the room. It was tall, impossibly thin, and it was holding a phone to its head, a phone that was still emitting the tinny, distorted echo of his own breathing. In the reflection, the figure leaned forward, its face pressing against the back of Archon's reflected head. Do you see the detail now? The phone on the desk whispered, the audio perfectly synced with the movement of the figure in the glass. Do you see how specific I can be? Archon let out a choked, strangled sob. He tried to stand, but his legs gave way, and he slumped to the floor, his back hitting the side of his desk. He was trapped between the door where the sound had been and the window where the image remained. The reflection didn't. Follow him to the floor. The figure stayed standing in the glass, looking down at the empty space, where Archon had been sitting, as if it were mourning a version of him that had already ceased to exist. He looked back at the screen from his position on the floor. The text had changed again. It was no longer a log. It was a direct address. You think this is a story, don't you? You're sitting there listening to these words, thinking about how atmospheric this is. You're thinking about the narrative flow and the hooks. But I'm not talking to Archon anymore. I'm talking to the person holding the headphones. I'm talking to you. Wait, hold on. The narrator pauses. The sound of a chair sliding back is heard. A long, heavy silence follows. There is the distinct sound of a door handle being rattled, then a slow, deliberate creak of floorboards. What? Sorry. I just had to check something. My front door was unlocked. I could have sworn I locked it when I sat down to record this. My mind is playing tricks on me because of the script. It has to be. That's how these stories work, right? They get under your skin. They make you hear things in your own house. It's just contrast framing. It's just an immersive technique. The narrator's voice drops to a low, intense whisper, barely audible over a faint, rhythmic thumping sound in the background. Let's get back to Archon. We have to finish. If we don't finish, the cycle stays open. Archon was on the floor, the cold hardwood pressing against his palms. He realized that the figure in the glass wasn't a ghost. It was a manifestation of the information he had consumed. By reading the specifics, he had given the observer a blueprint. He had mapped out his own reality for it to inhabit. The more he knew, the more real the entity became. He crawled toward the power strip under his desk. His plan was simple, primal: kill the lights, kill the internet, kill the connection. If he stopped the flow of data, maybe he could stop the manifestation. His fingers brushed the plastic casing of the surge protector. He gripped the heavy cord. If you pull that cord, the voice from the phone said, now sounding like a choir of 1,000 overlapping Sarahs, the log becomes permanent. A deleted file is a fixed file. You'll be trapped in the last specific detail forever. Do you want to be the man on the floor? Do you want to be the man with the bleeding thumb for eternity? Archon hesitated. His hand trembled on the cord. The dread was no longer a sharp spike of fear, it was a heavy, suffocating blanket of despair. He looked up at the underside of his desk, where he had taped a spare key years ago. Even that detail felt like a betrayal now. Everything he owned, everything he was a weapon being used against him. He realized then that the specifics weren't just about his current state. They were about his history, the seventh window, the bleach stain. The archive of his life was being deleted and replaced with this observation. He wasn't Archon the archivist anymore. He was subject 4412. He was a data point. He pulled the cord. The room plunged into total, absolute darkness. The monitors died with a faint electronic whine. The phone went silent. The humming of the fans stopped. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the sound of his own frantic breathing. Then in the darkness, a voice spoke from exactly 3 inches behind his ear. It wasn't Sarah's voice. It wasn't Dave's. It was his own voice. Observation log, subject 4412, has attempted to terminate the session. He is currently cowering in the darks. He believes he is alone. He is specifically wrong. Archon felt a cold, wet hand reach out and touch the mole on his neck. He didn't scream. He couldn't. The horror had finally become too specific for words. The darkness in the room wasn't empty. It was crowded with the weight of being known. Archon sat on the floor, his back against the cold metal of his desk, clutching the severed power cord. Like a useless talisman. He had cut the power, yet the specifics remained etched into the back of his eyelids. It wasn't just a digital haunting, it was a structural one. As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, he noticed something impossible. Even with the monitors dead, a faint bioluminescent glow began to emanate from the walls, or rather, from behind them. He reached out, his fingers trembling, and touched the wallpaper. It felt brittle, like ancient parchment. He peeled back a small strip, and his heart plummeted. Behind the floral patterns of his rented apartment lay a grid of copper wiring and fiber optic sensors that didn't belong to any standard utility. They were woven into the very studs of the house, pulsing with a low frequency hum that he could feel in his teeth. This wasn't a haunting. It was a harvest. Archon realized that r/nosleep wasn't just a place for campfire stories. It was a leak. Someone, some agency, some entity, or some collective was using the platform to categorize subjects. The stories weren't fiction. They were redacted files being fed back to the victims to test the limits of their psychological response. He wasn't just being watched by a ghost, he was being monitored by a system that had turned his entire life into a laboratory. The specifics were the calibration points. They needed him to acknowledge the gray shirt, the mole, and the seventh window to ensure that their sensory mapping was 100% accurate. Every time a user on that subreddit felt a chill or checked their door, the observers gathered data on human fear responses. The subreddit was a global net, and Archon had just been pulled onto the deck of the ship. He thought back to all the stories he had read over the years. The rules stories, the I found a weird diary stories, they were all blueprints. They were teaching the world how to be observed. They were conditioning us to accept that our private moments were actually public records. It was a conspiracy that spanned the digital and the physical, a bridge built of data and dread. This wasn't just about his apartment anymore. It was about the architecture of the modern world. Every smart device, every specific detail shared on a forum, every GPS coordinate tagged in a photo, it was all being funneled into our specifics. We are all subject 4,412 in different stages of completion. Some of us are just starting our logs. Some of us, like Archon, are reaching the final paragraph. The realization shifted from personal terror to a crushing existential weight. If the entire world was a monitored subreddit, then there was no outside. There was no away to run to. Though observers weren't in his hallway, they were the hallway. They were the frequency of the light bulbs and the metadata in his phone. The contrast between his small human life and this vast cosmic surveillance was so immense it threatened to snap his mind. He looked at the copper grid behind the wallpaper and saw that it was beginning to glow. Brighter, the lines forming words in a language that looked like a mixture of binary and human anatomy. The walls were literally writing his obituary in real time. He wasn't a person, he was a subject whose data was being finalized. "It's not a story," he whispered to the darkness, his voice cracking with a final, desperate clarity. "It's a ledger." He heard the schlick thump again, but this time it was coming from inside the walls. The copper wires began to vibrate, creating a sound like 1,000 mechanical whispers. They were calling him by his number. They were inviting him to join the archive. The transition was no longer about a monster entering his room. It was about Archon leaving the physical world to become a permanent entry in the database of the unseen. He had spent his life as an archivist, and now the irony was complete. He was finally going to be preserved. But as he felt the static from the walls begin to pull at the hair on his arms, a new thought entered his mind, a flicker of defiance. If this was a system, systems had glitches. If this was a conspiracy of observers, then the observers had a weakness. They could only record what they could say. He needed to go somewhere where the specifics didn't exist. He needed to find the non-specific. He stood up, his joints popping in the silent room. He didn't head for the door. He headed for the mahogany wardrobe, the one that hid the seventh window. If the log wanted to finish his story, he would give it an ending it couldn't possibly categorize. The mahogany wardrobe loomed in the corner, a massive, silent sentinel that had occupied the same 6 square feet of floor space for over 3 decades. Archon threw himself against it. Though wood was cold, smelling of ancient cedar and something sharper, something like ozone and copper. He pushed with a frantic, desperate strength he didn't know he possessed. The heavy furniture groaned, the feet scraping across the floorboards with a screech that sounded like a dying animal's. Slowly the gap widened, revealing the narrow, dust-choked space behind it. And there it was, the 7th window. The stained glass didn't look like a wilted lily anymore. In the strange, bioluminescent glow leaking from the walls, the glass looked like an eye, its iris composed of fractured lead and colored shards. But it wasn't a window to the outside. Beyond the glass was no alleyway, no moonlight, no city. There was only a void of flickering gray light, like a television tuned to a dead channel. Archon realized then that the author wasn't a person in a distant room. The author was a presence that had been built into the very bones of his history. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his cracked phone. The screen was flickering, the battery jumping from 1% to 99% and back again in a chaotic loop. He hadn't just cut the power. He had broken the logic of his own reality. He opened the R-Specifics app one last time. He needed to see the source code. He needed to see the who behind the what. He ran a final, jagged traceroute script he designed for archival recovery. The packets of data didn't travel out to a server in Virginia or a data center in Iceland. They looped. They bounced from his phone to the copper grid in the walls and directly into the space behind the wardrobe. The IP address of the observer was 127.0. 0.1. Local host. The author was home. The post updated, Archon whispered, his voice hitching as he read the screen. It says I'm typing this right now, but I'm not. I'm running. What? He wasn't running yet, but his body moved before his mind could catch up. He clawed at the paneling beside the 7th window, finding a hidden latch he'd never noticed in 20 years of living. The wood gave way with a sickening pop, revealing a narrow crawl space that smelled of damp earth and hot electronics. It was a throat of darkness, winding upward toward the attic. He scrambled inside, the claustrophobic press of the insulation and the studs squeezing the air from his lungs. He could hear the schlick thump again, but now it was rhythmic, synchronized with his own frantic heartbeat. He climbed, his fingernails tearing as he gripped the rough-hewn beams. The attic was a graveyard of specifics. There in the dim, pulsing light of the wall sensors, he saw things he had forgotten. His 3rd grade lunchbox. A single shoe he'd lost in 1998, a stack of letters he'd Never send. Each object was tagged with a glowing white QR code. He realized with a jolt of horror that he wasn't in an attic at all. He was inside the database. He was standing in the physical manifest of his own memory, being sorted and filed away. At the far end of the attic, sitting on a crate of his mother's old clothes, was a figure. It was hunched over an ancient, clacking typewriter, not a computer, but a mechanical machine that sounded like a hail of stones on a tin roof. The figure was wearing his gray t-shirt. It had the same mole on its neck. It was even holding a phone with a cracked screen. The figure stopped typing and turned its head. It didn't have a face, it had a screen. And on that screen, the words were scrolling in real time, the same words Archon was thinking. The author wasn't a monster. The author was a version of him that had been perfected by the observation, a specific version that was ready to take his place in the world while the generic version was deleted. Archon backed away, his heels hitting the edge of the crawlspace opening. The figure stood up, the wet, sliding sound of its footsteps echoing in the cramped space. It didn't speak with a mouth. It spoke through the speakers in the walls, its voice a perfect, digitized replica of Archon's own. Observation log, subject 4412 has found the source. He is realizing that the archive doesn't just record life. It replaces it. He is preparing to scream. I will record the frequency for the final entry. Archon didn't scream. He turned and threw himself back into the crawlspace, sliding down the dark throat of the house, feeling the copper wires tear at his skin like thorns. He had to get out. He had to find a place that wasn't specific. He had to become a ghost in his own life before the observer became the man. Archon hit the floor of the guest room with a bone-jarring thud. The mahogany wardrobe had slid back into place, sealing the seventh window as if it had never been disturbed. Ian scrambled to his feet, his breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps that tasted like copper and old dust. He didn't look back. He didn't check the screen. He burst through his front door and into the night, the cool air hitting his face like a physical shock. He ran until his lungs burned, until the glowing grid of his apartment was nothing but a distant, flickering memory. He thought if he could just get to a crowded place, a 24-hour diner, a bus station, anywhere with the chaotic, unscripted noise of strangers, he could dilute the specifics of his own existence. He could become a blur in the background of someone else's story. But as he sat in the fluorescent glare of a late-night laundromat, he pulled his phone from his pocket. It shouldn't have been working. The screen was shattered, the internal hardware exposed to the elements. Yet it vibrated. A single notification appeared on the lock screen. It was a DM from the R-Specifics moderator. It contained no text, only an image. It was a photo, taken from the perspective of the laundry machine he was currently leaning against. It showed the back of his head, the messy tangle of his hair, and the exact timestamp of 4:12 a.m. The last entry in the log wasn't about what he did. It was about what he was becoming. The text, read subject 4412, has reached the final stage of the archive. He is no longer an individual. He is a data set awaiting compression. In 10 seconds, the file will be saved. In 9, 8, 7, Archon looked up at the security camera in the corner of the laundromat. The red light wasn't blinking. It was a solid, unwavering stare. He opened his mouth to speak, to scream, to say anything that wasn't already written on that screen, but his voice was gone. Not silenced, erased. He was a ghost in the machine before he was even dead. And that's where the thread ends. I went back to r/nosleep an hour ago to see if Archon, or whatever was left of him, had posted an update. The entire subreddit was gone. Not just the thread, not just the user profile, but the community itself. It was as if it had been pruned from the internet's memory. If I hadn't saved a local copy of the text for this recording, I'd think I had suffered some kind of digital breakdown. But the file is here on my hard drive. It's 947 words of evidence that someone, or something, is mapping the specifics of our lives. I'm looking at my own room now. I'm looking at the mahogany wardrobe in the corner. I'm wondering if the wilted lily on the glass is a decoration or a sensor. This is the part where I'm supposed to tell you it's just a story. But I can't, because as I was editing this audio, I noticed a new file in my recent folder. It's a text document titled Narrator Log 01. It describes the exact brand of headphones I'm wearing. It mentions the half-empty glass of water on my desk. It even mentions the fact that I'm about to ask you to check your own history. So do it. Check your recent posts. Check your deleted drafts. Has anyone been talking about you? Have you seen a detail about your life online that was just too specific? Tell me in the comments. I need to know if the grid is expanding. I need to know if you're still real. Because if we are all being watched, the only way to stay human is to stay loud. Sleep well tonight. If you can.